They say the richest women have the easiest lives. They're wrong. Picture this. You're 7 months pregnant, standing in a ballroom with 1,000 people, watching your billionaire husband dance with his mistress to your wedding song. What do? Most women would scream, cry, make a scene. Catherine Morrison did something far more terrifying. She smiled, picked up her coat, and vanished. No goodbye, no explanation, no trace, just gone. Within 14 days, her husband lost everything. His $200 million deal collapsed. His company destroyed, his freedom gone. But all because one pregnant woman walked out of a gala without saying a single word. How did a silent departure destroy a billionaire overnight? What did Catherine know that gave her so much power? And most importantly, could you do what she did? Stay with me, because this story will change how you think about power, marriage, and the most dangerous weapon a woman possesses, her absence. Let's begin. They say you can pinpoint the exact moment a marriage dies. Mine died at 9:47 on a Saturday night, in a ballroom full of 1,000 people, while my husband danced with another woman to our wedding song. I stood alone by a marble pillar at the Lakeside Foundation Gala, my hand resting on my 7-month pregnant belly, watching Richard and Elise move as one across the dance floor. The Way You Look night played from the orchestra, the same song we'd chosen for our first dance 8 years ago. But Richard wasn't looking at me. He was looking at her. Elise Beaumont, 28 years old, marketing director at Morrison Development, my husband's mistress. Everyone knew. I could see it in the pitying glances from other guests, in the way conversations stopped when I approached, in the careful way people avoided mentioning Richard's name to my face. The pregnant wife was always the last to know, except I'd known for months. I'd documented everything. I'd planned everything. And tonight, I was executing the final phase of my escape. My reflection in the ballroom window showed a woman I barely recognized. Navy blue maternity dress. Conservative, expensive, forgettable. Richard's choice, not mine. 8 years ago, I wore red, bold colors, statement pieces. I was Catherine Ross, award-winning interior designer, owner of a thriving studio, daughter of an art teacher who believed homes should be full of light and life and color. Now I was Kate Morrison, gray, neutral, controlled, but not for much longer. Finally managed to get yourself pregnant. I turned to find Thomas Morrison, Richard's father, standing beside me with a crystal tumbler of scotch. 68 years old, Connecticut old money, a man who viewed people as assets on a balance sheet. About time you contributed something besides decoration to this family, he continued, his voice carrying the casual cruelty of someone who'd never been challenged. A Morrison heir, that's your value. Whoosh, something inside me went very still, very calm. Excuse me, I said quietly. Don't be sensitive, you know what I mean. This is good news, you've secured your position. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw Richard's future. This cold, hollow man who'd driven his own wife away 26 years ago. Grace, Richard's sister, had told me the story in whispers. Their mother disappeared when Grace was 10, vanished completely, and Thomas had simply hired a nanny and moved on. My position, I repeated softly. Yes, I understand completely. I walked away, not running, not crying, just removing myself from the toxicity with quiet dignity. In the ladies' room, I stood at the mirror alone. For the first time in months, I really looked at myself. Who had I become? When had I stopped being Catherine and become Kate? When had I traded my bold reds for safe navy blues? When had I learned to make myself small enough to fit into Richard Morrison's perfectly controlled world? I pulled out my phone, not the iPhone Richard monitored, but the secure burner phone I'd purchased 3 months ago with cash. I opened the hidden folder of photos, my design awards, my studio opening night, wearing that red dress, confident and alive. My mother, who died 5 years ago, smiling at my college graduation. And one photo that made my throat tight, Richard and me on our wedding day. I'd looked genuinely happy then. He had too. I scrolled to a recent photo Richard had posted on Instagram, him and Elise at a business dinner, her hand on his arm, both of them glowing. The caption, "Building the future." Our future. The one he'd decided didn't include me. I opened my messages and typed, "I'm ready." Jen's response came immediately. "Ready, ready? Or thinking about it ready?" Jen Palmer, my college roommate, family law attorney, the friend who'd been telling me to leave for 2 years. I typed, "I'm leaving tonight. Execute the plan." Three dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, oh my God, finally. "Okay, I'll call Daniel. Are you sure?" I looked at my reflection one more time. 7 months pregnant, 38 years old, standing in a bathroom at a charity gala, about to walk away from a billionaire husband and never look back. I'd never been more sure of anything. I typed, "Yes, I'm sure." The plan had started 3 months ago in Jen's law office downtown. I'd arrived crying, finally ready to admit what I'd known for years. My marriage was destroying me. "Kate, you need to leave him," Jen had said, passing me tissues across her desk. "He's cheating. He's financially abusive. He's isolating you from everyone who cares about you." "I can't. I'm pregnant. This baby, it's a miracle. We tried for so long. Maybe the baby will fix things." Jen had grabbed my hands. "Babies don't fix broken men. They just give broken men more people to break." "I need to try. Just, if it doesn't work, if I need to leave, will you help me?" "Of course, but we need to do this right. Disappear right. Your level of wealth, his level of control. You can't just walk out. He'll use every resource to drag you back." And she had helped. For 3 months, we'd prepared. Jen had connected me with Daniel, my younger brother, the truck driver Richard had always dismissed as unimportant. We'd met secretly at coffee shops across town, planning my escape like a military operation. "We treat this like a domestic violence case," Jen had explained, "because that's what it is. Financial abuse, emotional abuse, coercive control, all criminal." "What do you need from me?" Daniel had asked. "Can you drive Kate somewhere safe when the time comes? Somewhere Richard would never think to look?" Daniel had smiled. "Mom's old place in Seaside. He doesn't even know it exists." Our mother's house, the small cottage on the Oregon coast she'd inherited from her parents, the one she'd kept in her maiden name, the one I'd told Richard was sold years ago. Richard thought my mother was from Ohio. He'd never asked for details. He'd never cared about my life before him. That night and for weeks after, I documented everything. Every financial document, every text message between Richard and Elise, every hotel receipt charged to company accounts. At 2 in the morning while Richard slept, I'd photographed documents in his home office, embezzlement records, forged investor signatures, secret offshore accounts. Then I'd found his private journal. One entry had stopped me cold. "Father's ultimatum is clear. Produce a male heir by 42 or lose the trust." The IVF worked, but it's a girl. Useless. Elise is younger, healthier stock. "Once Kate delivers, I'll phase her out. Keep the baby, lose the wife. Elise can give me sons." I'd photographed every page with shaking hands. Now in the bathroom mirror, I touched my belly. "You're not useless," I whispered to my daughter. "You're the reason I'm finally brave enough to leave." I returned to the ballroom. Richard was laughing with investors now, Elise at his side playing the role I'd performed for 8 years, making him look human, making him look like someone worth trusting with $200 million. Grace intercepted me near the coat check. Richard's sister, 36, the only member of his family who'd ever shown me kindness. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "about everything, about how they treat you, about what he's doing." "You knew?" "Everyone knows. I'm ashamed I didn't say anything sooner." Her eyes were wet. "If you need help." I touched her arm gently. "Thank you, Grace. That means more than you know." "Where are you going?" I smiled. "Home." I collected my wrap from the coat check attendant, who smiled sympathetically. "Leaving early, Mrs. Morrison?" "Yes, I'm very tired." "Should I call your driver?" "No, thank you. I've made other arrangements." Outside, a nondescript rental sedan waited at the curb. Daniel sat behind the wheel, engine running. I slid into the passenger seat. "You good?" he asked. "Drive." As we pulled away, I looked back once at the glittering hotel entrance. Inside, Richard was building his future with someone else, using my work, my vision, my taste to close his deals. He thought he was the empire. He was wrong. I turned forward and never looked back again. 90 minutes after I left the gala, Richard Morrison walked into our Lincoln Park penthouse, expecting to find his pregnant wife asleep. Instead, he found silence. "Kate," he called, loosening his bow tie. "Are you asleep?" The apartment answered with emptiness. He moved through the rooms, master bedroom, guest room, the nursery we'd been preparing. All dark, all vacant. In the kitchen, arranged precisely on the marble counter, he found my wedding ring, my phone, my credit cards, my keys to the penthouse and his cars, and a USB drive with a note written in my handwriting. "Watch me." I'd recorded the video 3 days earlier in a hotel room Daniel had rented under a fake name. I'd rehearsed it 20 times until my voice was steady, my message clear. Richard plugged the USB into his laptop with shaking hands. My face filled the screen. Calm, composed, 7 months pregnant. "Hello, Richard. By the time you watch this, I'll be somewhere you'll never find me. You're probably confused, maybe angry, maybe already planning how to drag me back. Let me save you the effort. I'm not leaving because I'm weak. I'm not leaving because I'm hormonal or confused or any of the other explanations you're already formulating. I'm leaving because I finally remembered who I was before I met you. For 8 years, I made you look good. I managed your relationships with investors. They didn't trust your numbers, Richard. They trusted my taste. I designed the spaces that closed your deals. I was the warmth that made cold people write checks. You thought you built an empire, but I was the foundation, and now I'm gone. The USB drive contains copies of your financial fraud, the embezzlement from your family trust, the forged signatures on investor documents, your affair documented in company expense reports, and your journal, the one where you called our daughter useless in my body breeding stock. Here's what happens next. You leave me alone. You don't look for me. You don't file for custody. You don't contact my family or friends, and in exchange, these files stay private. You keep your company, your reputation, your freedom. But if you come after me, if I hear that you've hired an investigator, filed a missing person report, or tried to access my accounts, every news outlet, every law enforcement agency, and every investor you've ever lied to will receive these files. You taught me everything I know about leverage, Richard. I'm just better at using it. Goodbye." The screen went black. According to Daniel, who'd parked across the street to watch, Richard stood frozen for 17 minutes. Then he grabbed his phone and started calling. My number, disconnected. Daniel's number, straight to voicemail. Then he called Jen. "Richard," she answered, her voice professionally cool. "I represent Catherine Morrison in her separation from you. Any communication should go through me." "What the hell is happening? Where is she?" "My client is safe. That's all you need to know. She's 7 months pregnant. She's carrying my child, and she'll deliver that child safely, far away from you. I suggest you watch the video," she left, "and consider your options carefully. Good night, Richard." She hung up. Richard called his own lawyer at 11:30 at night. "Richard, if she has documentation of financial irregularities, you need to be very careful," his attorney said. "Do not file a missing person report. That opens you up to scrutiny from law enforcement." "What am I supposed to do? Just let her go?" "For now, yes. Let me reach out to her attorney. See if we can negotiate." But there would be no negotiation. I'd made that clear. Richard stood alone in his luxury penthouse, 4,000 square feet of perfect design that I'd created, every room a testament to my talent. And for the first time in his life, he was completely powerless. We drove through the night, Daniel at the wheel, me in the passenger seat, watching Chicago disappear in the rearview mirror. We stopped once at a rest stop in Wisconsin, where I threw my old phone in a dumpster and activated the new one Jen had prepared. "How do you feel?" Daniel asked when we got back on the road. "Free," I touched my belly, scared but mostly free. "He's going to lose his mind." "I know, that's the point." We drove west through Iowa, Nebraska, Wyoming. Daniel insisted on stopping every 2 hours so I could stretch my legs and use the bathroom. We ate at diners where nobody recognized me, slept in budget motels paid for with Daniel's cash. For 3 days, we existed off the grid, untraceable. On the third day, we crossed into Oregon and started following the coast north. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly to our left, gray and powerful under cloudy skies. Almost there, Daniel said. The house appeared exactly as I remembered it from childhood visits. A small craftsman cottage perched on a bluff overlooking the sea, white paint peeling slightly, wild roses growing up the porch rails, my mother's wind chimes singing in the ocean breeze. Inside, everything was frozen in time. My mother's watercolor paintings still hung on the walls, sunflowers, coastal scenes, abstract splashes of color. Her art studio, a converted garage, held half-finished canvases and jars of dried brushes. I've been paying the utilities, Daniel said. Drove out here a few times to keep it maintained. Figured we might need it someday. I stood in the center of the living room, sunlight streaming through the windows, ocean sounds drifting through the open door. After 8 years in Richard's controlled, perfect spaces, this small, imperfect house felt like coming home. Thank you, I whispered. Daniel hugged me carefully, mindful of my belly. You're safe now, Kate. That's all that matters. That first night, I slept in my mother's old bedroom, wrapped in quilts that still smelled faintly of her lavender sachets. I dreamed of painting, of colors, of my daughter growing up in a house full of light. When I woke, sunlight was pouring through the windows, and for the first time in years, I felt like myself again. Richard Morrison woke on his leather couch the morning after the gala, my video playing on repeat in his mind. He'd watched it 11 times during the night, analyzing every word, searching for weaknesses in my strategy. He found none. His first call was to his father. Your wife left you? Thomas Morrison's voice dripped with contempt. Christ, Richard, control your household. It's temporary, a pregnancy tantrum. She'll be back when she needs money. She better be. The London investors specifically requested her design input. Without her touch, they're going to walk. Fix this. Richard hung up, a flicker of concern crossing his face. The London project, a $200 million luxury residential development, was his crown jewel. He'd spent 2 years cultivating those investors, and they'd made it clear. They weren't investing in Morrison Development. They were investing in what Richard and Kate Morrison represented together. He tried to access our joint accounts. Frozen. My name was still on them, but I'd filed legal holds through Jen. He checked my personal accounts. Empty. Cleaned out weeks ago. His own accounts were untouched. I'd taken only what was legally mine, nothing more. That detail bothered him more than anything. If I'd stolen from him, he could paint me as vindictive, unstable. But I'd been precise, legal, unassailable. She planned this, he muttered to himself. For weeks. How did I not see it? Because you weren't looking, I imagined telling him. You haven't really looked at me in years. By midday, his phone was exploding with messages from investors. Is it true Kate left? We need to discuss the Greystone project. She was our point person. From his sister Grace. I heard, are you okay? Is Kate okay? From Elise, everyone's talking. Should I come over? He ignored most of them and called his lawyer again. Richard, I reached out to her attorney. They're not interested in negotiating. She wants a clean separation, and she's using the threat of those documents as leverage. What are my options? Legally, give her what she wants. The documents she has, if they're real, could destroy you. Wire fraud, embezzlement, investor fraud. You could face federal charges. So I'm just supposed to let her vanish with my daughter? Richard, if you fight this, if you try to find her or file for custody, she'll release those files. And then you won't just lose your daughter. You'll lose your freedom. Richard ended the call and threw his phone across the room. That evening, he attended a pre-scheduled investor dinner. Alone. Elise had wanted to come. He'd told her no. Too soon. Too obvious. The lead investor, a wealthy British developer named Malcolm Ashford, noticed immediately. Richard, where's Kate? We specifically wanted her insight on the London residential designs. She's indisposed. Pregnancy rest. Doctor's orders. Malcolm frowned. Pity. Her eye for livable luxury is what sold us on the project. Your numbers are impressive, Richard. But numbers don't make a home. Kate understands that. She understands how people want to live. Richard forced a smile, but inside he was fracturing. Without me, he was just numbers and charm. And charm alone didn't close $200 million deals. By day 2, Richard was spiraling. He hadn't slept. He'd watched my video so many times he could recite it. He kept noticing details he'd missed. The window behind me showing gray skies and ocean. Pacific Northwest, probably. Oregon or Washington. He called a private investigator. Mr. Reed, Morrison, if your wife is as intelligent as you say, she'll have used cash, burner phones, maybe a professional disappearance service. This could take weeks to track her down. I don't have weeks. Find her. It'll be expensive. I don't care. Find my wife. But the investigator found nothing. I disappeared completely. No credit card transactions, no phone pings, no digital footprint. It was as if I'd ceased to exist. On day 3, a gossip blog published, Billionaire's pregnant wife missing after charity gala. Sources say she left voluntarily. Richard's PR team released a statement. Catherine Morrison is taking private time for her health and the health of her baby. The Morrison family requests privacy. But social media had already made its judgment. Good for her. Leave the billionaire. He was cheating with that Elise woman. Everyone knew. Pregnant women don't just leave unless something is very wrong. Public opinion crystallized instantly. I was the sympathetic victim. He was the villain. Everything Richard had built, his reputation as a family man, his image as a devoted husband, crumbled in less than 72 hours. On day 4, Elise confronted him. Everyone's asking me if we're together. What do I say? Tell them it's none of their business. Richard, I left my last relationship for you. You said once Kate was out of the picture. Kate is out of the picture, he shouted. But I can't exactly parade you around while my pregnant wife is missing, can I? Elise's face crumpled. So I'm just, what, a secret still? Until this blows over, yes. And when does it blow over? I don't know, she left crying. Richard didn't follow her. He sat alone in his office, surrounded by photographs of himself and me at charity events, galas, investor dinners. In every photo, I was smiling, playing my role perfectly, making him look human, making him look like someone worth trusting. He'd taken it all for granted. He'd assumed I would always be there, always performing, always making him shine. Now he was just a man alone in an office, realizing too late that he'd thrown away the only thing that made him whole. On day 5, everything accelerated. An anonymous source leaked documents to a financial journalist, evidence of Richard's embezzlement from the Morrison Family Trust. He'd been skimming money for months to fund the London expansion, forging his father's signature on transfer documents. The article published that afternoon. Morrison Development under investigation. Founder allegedly embezzled millions from family trust. Thomas Morrison called apoplectic. You stole from the family to fund your London vanity project? It's a loan. I was going to pay it back. With what? The London deal's falling apart. You're bleeding money. And where the hell is your wife? I don't know. Find her. Fix this. Fix, or I'm removing you from the trust entirely. But Richard couldn't fix it. Everything was unraveling faster than he could contain it. The Morrison Development Board demanded an emergency meeting. Investors started calling with concerns. The SE opened a preliminary inquiry into his business practices. And through it all, I remained invisible, silent, gone. On day 6, Richard's investigator finally found something. Mr. Morrison, I found something. Kate's brother Daniel drove a rent-a-car out of Illinois the night of the gala, headed west on I-80. Where did he go? Oregon, looks like. But then the trail goes cold. No credit cards, no phone pings, no hotel records. If she's there, she's completely off-grid. Oregon. Richard frowned. She doesn't know anyone in Oregon. You sure about that? Richard realized with a shock he knew nothing about my life before him, my mother, my childhood, where I grew up, who my friends were. He'd never asked, never cared. I'd been his wife for 8 years, and he didn't even know which state I was born in. On day 7, Detective Sarah Brence walked into Richard's office unannounced. She was in her late 40s, with sharp eyes and the comfortable authority of someone who'd seen it all. She sat down across from Richard without waiting for an invitation. "Mr. Morrison, I'm Detective Sarah Brennan, Chicago PD. I'm here about your wife, Catherine." Richard's blood ran cold. "I haven't filed a missing person report. My wife left voluntarily. It's a private matter." "I'm aware. That's actually why I'm here. We received an anonymous tip that Mrs. Morrison may have left due to domestic abuse." "That's absurd. I never touched her." Brennan's expression didn't change. "I didn't say physical abuse, Mr. Morrison. Coercive control, financial abuse, emotional manipulation, those are crimes too. Based on what we've seen, there's enough to open an investigation." "Who sent you? Was it Kate? Is she trying to destroy me?" "Your wife hasn't contacted us, but others have. Friends, family members, people concerned for her safety. So I'm here to ask, where is she?" "I don't know." "Do you want to find her?" Richard paused. "Of course I do. She's my wife. She's carrying my child." Brennan leaned forward. "Then I suggest you leave her alone, because if you use your resources to hunt her down, if you file for custody, if you try to control her from a distance, I'll be watching. And every financial irregularity, every forged document, every shady deal you've ever made, I'll find it. Are you threatening me? I'm giving you a choice. Let her go or lose everything." She stood, placed her card on his desk, and walked out. Richard stared at the card for a long time. Then he crumpled it, then smoothed it out again. For the first time in his life, Richard Morrison understood what it felt like to be powerless. While Richard's world collapsed in Chicago, I was rebuilding mine in Oregon. The first week was about rest, about breathing, about remembering what it felt like to exist without constantly monitoring someone else's mood, anticipating someone else's needs, making myself small enough to avoid someone else's anger. I spent hours in my mother's art studio, surrounded by her unfinished paintings. One canvas caught my attention: sunflowers, half-painted, waiting for someone to complete them. I picked up a brush, dipped it in yellow paint, hesitated. 8 years ago, I'd been fearless with color, bold, confident. Somewhere along the way, Richard had convinced me that my taste was too bright, too bold, too much. He preferred gray, neutral, controlled. I'd become gray, too. I touched brush to canvas and finished my mother's sunflowers. Bright, bold, unapologetic. The baby kicked. "You like that?" I said to my belly. "Mama's remembering how to be colorful." Daniel stayed for the first week, making sure I was settled, that I had everything I needed. Then he returned to his regular truck, driving routes, checking in daily via encrypted messages. Jen called frequently via secure video. "Richard's lawyer reached out," she said during one call. "They want to negotiate." "What are they offering?" "They'll agree to the separation if you return certain documents and sign a non-disclosure agreement." "No, Kate, they're offering $5 million. I don't want his money. I want him to leave me alone." "Then we hold firm. The files are your leverage. As long as he doesn't know what you'll do with them, he can't risk aggressive action." "Good, let him sweat." But I wasn't cruel enough to acknowledge Richard's suffering. I just wanted freedom and safety, and the chance to raise my daughter away from the Morrison family's toxicity. 10 days after the gala, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Kate, please don't hang up." "Grace, Richard's sister." "How did you get this number?" "Jen gave it to me. She vouched for me." "Kate, I need to tell you something about Richard, about my family." I sat down, one hand on my belly. "I'm listening." "My father did the same thing to my mother that Richard is doing to you." Grace's voice shook. "Used her to produce heirs, then discarded her. She disappeared when I was 10. I haven't seen her in 26 years. Grace, I've lived with that guilt my whole life, that I didn't protect her. I won't make that mistake again." She took a deep breath. "I have documents. Proof of father's financial control over Richard. Proof that Richard is embezzling from the family trust to fund the London expansion. I've been collecting evidence for years, waiting for the right moment. This is it." "Why are you doing this?" Because you're the first person who was ever kind to me in that family. And because I don't want your daughter to grow up without a mother like I did. Use what I give you. Burn it all down. We talked for an hour. Grace sent encrypted files, years of documentation, bank transfers, forged signatures, evidence that the Morrison family's dysfunction went back decades. Thank you, I said finally, for choosing truth over loyalty. Thank you for showing me what courage looks like. After we hung up, I forwarded everything to Jen with a simple message. When the time is right, release these to the press. The days settled into a rhythm. I woke with the sunrise, walked along the beach, painted in my mother's studio. I read books about childbirth and parenting. I prepared the small second bedroom as a nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow, hanging my mother's watercolors above the crib. One afternoon, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, the mirror technique that had helped me see clearly that night at the gala, 7 months pregnant. 38 years old, no makeup, hair in a messy bun, wearing paint-stained overalls. I looked happy. When was the last time I'd looked happy? We're going to be okay, I told my reflection. Told my daughter. Better than okay, we're going to be free. On day 14 after the gala, everything exploded. Grace held a press conference. I watched it live on TV, Daniel sitting beside me on the couch. I'm Grace Morrison, Richard Morrison's sister, she said, facing dozens of cameras. I'm here today to set the record straight about my brother and his missing wife. Catherine Morrison isn't missing. She's safe. She left a toxic, controlling marriage. And I don't blame her. My brother is currently under investigation for embezzling from our family trust. He forged investor signatures. He used company funds for personal expenses, including his affair with an employee. Kate didn't abandon him. She escaped him. And I'm helping her because I watched my father do the same thing to my mother 26 years ago. The Morrison men see women as breeding stock and status symbols. It ends now. She released documents to the press, everything Grace had collected, plus what I'd provided. The media explosion was instantaneous. Within hours, Morrison Development's board demanded Richard's resignation. The London investors officially withdrew their $200 million commitment. The SEC opened a formal investigation. Thomas Morrison publicly disowned his son, and Elise released a statement through her lawyer. I was misled by Richard Morrison about the status of his marriage and his financial situation. I have fully cooperated with investigators. Even his mistress had abandoned him. 14 days after I vanished from the gala, Richard Morrison was arrested at his penthouse. Wire fraud, embezzlement, investor fraud. I watched the news footage of him being let out in handcuffs, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. How do you feel? Daniel asked quietly. I touched my belly where my daughter was kicking. Sad, for the man he could have been, but not sad enough to regret leaving. Good, that's healthy. Will you do me a favor? Tell Jen to send Richard's lawyer a message. Tell him I hope he uses his time in prison to become the man he pretended to be. Daniel nodded. You're more generous than he deserves. Maybe, but I don't want to be the kind of person who celebrates someone else's destruction. I just want to be free. And I was, completely, finally, free. 8 weeks after the gala, at 3:17 in the morning, Clara Rose Morrison, soon to be Clara Rose Ross, entered the world. The labor was long, 12 hours of increasing intensity in a small hospital in Seaside, Oregon. Daniel held one hand, Jen held the other. A kind nurse named Ruth, who reminded me of my mother, coached me through each contraction. You're doing beautifully, Ruth said. Your daughter is almost here. When Clara finally arrived, slippery and screaming and perfect, I cried so hard I couldn't see her clearly. She's perfect, Ruth said, placing Clara on my chest. 8 pounds, 2 ounces, healthy and strong. I looked down at my daughter, dark hair, my nose, eyes that would probably be brown like mine. She stopped crying when she felt my heartbeat, her tiny hand curling around my finger. Hi, baby girl, I whispered. I'm your mama. You're safe, you're loved, and you're free. Daniel stood at the foot of the bed, crying openly. Jen wiped her eyes with a tissue. She's beautiful, Kate, Jen said. She is, I agreed. She really is. That first night, alone with Clara in the recovery room, I watched dawn light creep across the ocean through the window. Clara slept in my arms, her breathing soft and steady. Your daddy isn't a bad man, I told her quietly. He's just broken. And broken people break other people. I stayed too long hoping I could fix him, but you can't fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed. What I can do is make sure you grow up knowing you're whole. You don't need anyone to complete you. You're already complete. Clara yawned. I laughed. You're right, that's too heavy for day one. How about this? I love you, more than anything. And I'm going to spend every day showing you what love actually looks like. 3 days after Clara's birth, Jen brought me a letter. It had arrived at her office, forwarded from Richard's lawyer. It's from him, Jen said. You don't have to read it. I want to. I opened it while Clara slept in the bassinet beside my bed. Richard's handwriting, usually so confident, looked shaky. Kate, I'm writing this from a jail cell. My lawyer says I'll probably serve 4 to 6 years if I take the plea deal. Longer if I fight and lose. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm writing because my court-mandated therapist says I need to take accountability. So here it is. You were right about everything. I used you. I saw you as a tool, not a person. I took credit for your work. I isolated you from your friends and family. I made you small so I could feel big. The worst part, I told myself I loved you. I believed it, but I didn't love you. I loved what you did for me. There's a difference. I'm only now understanding that. You asked me once why I married you. I told you it was because you made me a better man. That was a lie. I married you because you made me look like a better man, and when I couldn't see the difference anymore, I threw you away. I destroyed the best thing in my life because I'm fundamentally hollow. All structure, no soul. Isn't that what that British investor said? I don't expect you to respond. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know you won. Not because you destroyed me. I destroyed myself. You just refused to go down with me. I hope our daughter never knows what a fool her father was. Richard has read it twice, then folded it and placed it in a drawer. How do you feel? Jen asked. For him, for the man he could have been, but not sad enough to regret leaving. Good. That's healthy. I looked at Clara, sleeping peacefully. Send his lawyer a message. Tell Richard I hope he uses his time in prison to become the man he pretended to be. And tell him that when Clara's old enough to ask about him, I'll tell her the truth. He wasn't a villain. He was just empty. And that's sadder than any monster. The first 6 months of Clara's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and quiet joy. I'd forgotten what it felt like to make my own decisions, to live without someone scrutinizing every choice, to simply be. Daniel visited every few weeks between trucking routes, bringing supplies and terrible dad jokes. Jen flew out monthly, combining the work trips with visits to her favorite niece. Grace sent packages, beautiful children's books, soft blankets, a handwritten note that said simply, "Thank you for saving yourself." I didn't hear from Richard again. According to Jen, he'd taken the plea deal, 4 years for fraud and embezzlement, with possibility of parole after 2. I felt nothing when she told me. No satisfaction, no vindication, just a quiet sense of closure. He's not requesting visitation rights, Jen added. His lawyer says he wants Clara to grow up without his influence. He's actually being selfless for once. Good, I said. Clara deserves better than a father who sees her as breeding stock. You know, Jen said carefully, you're allowed to be angry at him. I was angry for years, but anger is heavy and I'm tired of carrying heavy things. When Clara was 3 months old, I started working again. My mother's garage studio became my design office. I bought a drafting table, set up my laptop, created a website, Ross Design Studio, independent interior designer specializing in warm, livable luxury. My first client came through word of mouth, a friend of Jen's who needed help with a home renovation. I want spaces that feel lived in, she said during our consultation. Not like a magazine spread, like a real home. I can do that, I said, and I could. Without Richard's influence, without the pressure to impress wealthy investors, I designed spaces that felt authentic, warm, human. That first project led to another, and another. By the time Clara was 6 months old, I had a wait list. I worked during naps and after bedtime, bringing Clara to client meetings in her carrier. Some clients were put off by the baby. Others loved it. You understand what it's like to actually live in a home, one client said, not just look at it. That's always been my philosophy, I replied. Homes should be full of life, not just beautiful objects. One afternoon, when Clara was almost 7 months old, there was a knock at my studio door. I opened it to find a woman in her 50s, stylishly dressed, radiating quiet confidence. Catherine Morrison? Ross, Catherine Ross. I took back my maiden name. The woman smiled. Even better. I'm Margaret Thornton, VP of Design at Cascade Interiors. We're a boutique firm based in Portland. I've been following your work, the community center renovation, the local library redesign, the affordable housing project. You're extraordinarily talented. I blinked. Thank you, but I'm not looking for a job. I like working independently. I'm not offering a job. I'm offering a partnership. Clara made a noise from her playpen. Margaret glanced over, her expression softening. How old? 7 months. Beautiful. My daughter just turned 30. Best thing I ever did was refuse to choose between career and family. She turned back to me. Cascade wants to expand into residential design. We need someone with your vision to lead the division. Full creative control, equity stake, remote flexibility. You build your team, your way. I have a 7-month-old. I can't travel constantly or work 80-hour weeks. We don't want you to. We want your brain and your heart, not your life. Family-first flexibility is company policy. In fact, I specifically sought you out because of what you survived. I froze. You know about everything? Everyone does. And here's what I know. Women who've been through hell make the best leaders. They have nothing left to prove and everything to build. Margaret handed me her card. Think about it. No pressure. But I believe you're exactly who we need. After she left, I sat at my drafting table, staring at the card. Catherine Ross, independent designer, single mother, survivor, or Catherine Ross, partner at Cascade Interiors, leader of a residential design division. Still a single mother, still a survivor, just with more resources to help other people. I called Jen. Take the meeting, she said immediately. See what they're offering. Worst case, you say no. What if I fail? Kate, you escaped a billionaire narcissist, vanished without a trace, gave birth alone, and built a successful design business in 6 months. You don't know how to fail. I laughed. When did you become such a motivational speaker? When my best friend became a badass. 2 weeks later, I drove to Portland for a formal meeting with Cascade's executive team. Clara came with me, naturally. Daniel had offered to babysit, but I'd refused. They need to know I'm a package deal, I'd said. If they can't handle a baby in the meeting, they're not the right fit. Margaret met us in the lobby. Clara? She's even more beautiful in person. She didn't ask to hold her, didn't make cooing noises, just smiled and led us to the conference room. 3 other executives waited, the CEO, the CFO, and the director of operations. All women, all around my age or older. Catherine Said, the CEO, said, "We've reviewed your portfolio extensively. Your work is exceptional, but more importantly, your story is important." I tensed. My story? Women leaving abusive relationships often lose everything. Their homes, their careers, their financial independence. You proved that's not inevitable, and we want to help you prove it on a larger scale. The CFO leaned forward. We're proposing that 20% of your division's profits go to a fund supporting women rebuilding their careers after leaving domestic violence situations. Training programs, scholarships, business startup grants. I looked down at Clara, who was chewing on her teething ring, oblivious to the fact that her mother's life was about to change again. I have one condition, I said finally. I choose my team, and I only hire people who've been underestimated. Margaret smiled. Deal. Welcome to Cascade, Kate. Over the next 6 months, I built something I'd never had with Richard, a real partnership. Margaret became my mentor, teaching me how to lead without controlling, how to build a team that functioned through collaboration instead of fear. I hired slowly, carefully, looking for talent that had been overlooked by traditional firms. My first hire was Sarah, a 52-year-old designer who had left the industry 15 years earlier to raise her kids. Her portfolio was dated but brilliant. "I can't believe anyone wants to hire me," she said during our interview. "I'm so out of touch." "You understand how families actually live," I replied. "That's never out of touch." My second hire was Marcus, a young black designer who'd been passed over for promotions at 3 major firms despite being more talented than his peers. "I'm tired of making other people look good," he said bluntly. "Then don't. Make yourself look good. And help me build something where talent matters more than connections." By the time Clara turned 1, my division had 15 employees, 75 active clients, and a reputation for designing spaces that felt like homes instead of showrooms. We worked remotely when possible. We held meetings during school hours. We had a company daycare, and we made it clear. Family came first. Always. "You're building what Richard should have built," Jen said during one visit. "A company with a soul." "I'm building what my mother would have built," I corrected, "if she'd had the chance." Clara's first birthday party was small. Just me, Daniel, Jibby, Jen, Grace, and a few local friends I'd made. We ate cake in my mother's backyard, Clara smashing her slice with delighted laughter. "Make a wish for her," Jen said. I looked at my daughter, healthy, happy, loved, growing up in a house full of color and light and freedom. "I don't need to," I said. "Everything I wished for already came true." That night, after everyone left, I sat in my studio with Clara sleeping in my arms. The sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. My phone buzzed, an email from an unfamiliar address. I almost deleted it. Then I saw the subject line, "From Richard." My finger hovered over the delete button. Then I opened it. "Kate, my lawyer probably shouldn't be forwarding this, but I asked him to make an exception. I'm writing from prison. I've served 8 months of my 4-year sentence. I spend most of my time in therapy, trying to understand how I became the man I became. My therapist asks me to identify moments of choice, times when I could have chosen differently. There are hundreds, thousands. Every time I dismissed your opinion, every time I took credit for your work, every time I chose my ego over your humanity. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve contact with you or Clara. I'm writing because my therapist says I need to acknowledge what I lost, not just what I did wrong. I lost the only person who ever truly saw me and loved me anyway. I lost the chance to be a father. I lost the possibility of being better than my father, better than the hollow men my family produces. Mostly I lost you. And I'm beginning to understand that you were the only real thing I ever had. I know Clara's birthday was yesterday. I hope she's happy. I hope she never knows my name. I hope she grows up to be exactly like you. Strong and kind and brave enough to walk away from anything that makes her smaller. I won't write again. This isn't about seeking absolution. It's about finally, after 42 years, telling the complete truth. I loved you. Not the way I claimed, not the way you deserved, but in the only way I was capable of at the time. And now, in this cell, learning to be a better man than I was, I understand what love actually is. It's not ownership. It's not control. It's not using someone to fill your emptiness. It's setting them free. So that's what I'm doing, officially, completely. I'm setting you free. Be happy, Kate. Teach our daughter to be happy. And maybe someday, when she's old enough to understand, tell her that her father tried to become better. Even if he failed at everything else, he tried to get that part right. Richard had read it 3 times, cried a little, then closed my laptop. "Your daddy is trying," I whispered to sleeping Clara. "That's more than I expected. But you'll never have to wonder if you're enough, because you are. You always were." 18 months after I left the Gala, my life had settled into something I'd never expected. Peace. Clara was walking, chattering in half sentences, obsessed with pointing at birds. My design division was thriving. I'd moved out of my mother's cottage into a larger house with an ocean view, purchased with my own money in my own name. I'd started dating casually, nothing serious, just remembering what it felt like to be seen as Catherine, not as Richard Morrison's wife or Clara's mother. Just me. Life was good, quiet, mine. Then Grace called. Kate, it's urgent. Can you talk? I put Clara in her playpen with toys. What's wrong? It's father, Thomas Morrison. He had a stroke 3 days ago. The doctors say he won't recover. He's dying. I'm sorry, Grace. I know that's complicated. That's not why I'm calling. She paused. He's asking for you. What? He's been asking for you for 2 days. Keeps saying your name. The nurses thought he was confused, but I realized he wants to talk to you before he dies. Grace, I left that family. I'm not going back. I know, but Kate, I think he wants to apologize. And I know you don't owe him anything, but I also know you, and I know you'll regret it if you don't at least hear what he has to say. I closed my eyes. Thomas Morrison. The man who'd called me decorative, who'd said my value was producing an heir, who'd treated his own wife so badly she disappeared for 26 years. Where is he? Northwestern Memorial, ICU. I'll make sure you can visit with Wish running into other family. Give me 2 days to arrange childcare. 3 days later, I stood outside Thomas Morrison's hospital room, my heart pounding. Grace waited in the hallway. Thank you for coming. I'm not sure why I'm here. Because you're a better person than any of us deserved. I pushed open the door. Thomas lay in the hospital bed, smaller than I remembered. 88 years old now, tubes and wires connecting him to machines that beeped steadily. His eyes opened when I entered. Catherine. His voice was barely a whisper. I'm here. I wronged you. Each word seemed to cost him. Treated you like property, like breeding stock, like my father treated my mother, like I taught Richard to treat you. Yes, I said simply. You did. I destroyed my family, my wife, my son, very nearly destroyed you. He coughed weakly. Spent my whole life building an empire, but empires built on cruelty don't last. They just create rubble. Why did you want to see me? To apologize. To tell you that you were right to leave. That your daughter is lucky to have a mother brave enough to run. His eyes were wet. My wife ran too. I spent 26 years telling myself she was weak. But she wasn't. She was strong, like you. I stood there watching this old man face his mortality and his mistakes. Do you know where she is? Your wife? No, I destroyed that bridge. Some things can't be fixed. Some things can't, I agreed, but some things can be learned from. Will you tell Claire about me? I'll tell her the truth, that her grandfather was a complicated man who hurt people, including her father. But at the very end, he tried to take responsibility. That's more than nothing. It's less than I owe. But thank you. I turned to leave. Catherine? I looked back. You were the best thing that ever happened to our family. We were too blind to see it. I know, I said quietly, but I see it now, and that's enough. I walked out. Grace was waiting. How do you feel? Tired, but lighter. Thomas Morrison died 3 days later. I didn't attend the funeral, but I sent flowers with a card. You tried at the end, that matters. When Clara was 2.5, we took our first trip back to Chicago, not to see Richard's family, not to revisit the past, but because I'd been invited to speak at a design conference about creating spaces for trauma survivors. You don't have to do this, Jen said, meeting us at the airport. I want to, not for me, for everyone still trapped in situations like I was. The conference was at the Lakeside Hotel, the same hotel where I'd vanished from the Gala 3 years earlier. I stood in the lobby, Clara's hand in mine, looking at the ballroom entrance. The last time I'd been here, I was 7 months pregnant, trapped in a navy dress, watching my husband dance with his mistress. Now I was wearing red, bright, bold, unapologetic red. Clara wore yellow. We were a riot of color in a sea of neutrals. Pretty, Clara said, pointing at the chandelier. Very pretty. Come on, baby. Mama has to work. My presentation was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon. The room was packed. 200 designers, architects, survivors. I stood at the podium, Clara coloring quietly in the front row with Jen. My name is Catherine Ross, I began. 3 years ago, I was Catherine Morrison, wife of a billionaire, living in a penthouse, attending galas, and absolutely miserable. I spent 8 years in a marriage where I was valued for what I produced, not who I was. I made my husband look good. I designed spaces that closed his deals. I performed the role of devoted wife while he systematically erased everything that made me myself. And then one night at a gala in this very hotel, I watched him dance with his mistress to our wedding song. And something inside me just clicked. I didn't make a scene. I didn't confront him. I just left. Silently. Completely. And that silence saved my life. I told them about the planning, the documentation, the strategic disappearing. I told them about giving birth alone in Oregon, about rebuilding my career from my mother's garage, about learning to be whole again. Leaving isn't weakness, I said. Leaving is the bravest thing you can do. And if you're in a situation where you need to leave, financially, emotionally, physically, please know you are not alone. You are not trapped. You are strong enough to walk away. And on the other side of that door is a life where you get to be yourself again. Colorful, loud, unapologetic, free. The room erupted in applause. Afterward, dozens of people approached me. Survivors sharing their stories. Designers asking how they could create spaces that prioritized healing over aesthetics. Women thanking me for showing them it was possible to rebuild. One woman around my age grabbed my hands. "I left 3 months ago," she said, crying. "I have nothing. No dia wildchild, no money, living with my sister. But I'm free. And hearing you talk, seeing what you built, I know I can do this." "You can," I said firmly, "and you will, one day at a time." That night, Jen and I sat in my old favorite coffee shop in Lincoln Park, the one I used to visit alone before Richard decided my schedule for me. "You know what's funny?" I said, watching Clara play with her stuffed rabbit. "I spent 8 years thinking I needed Richard's money, his status, his name to matter. But I mattered the whole time. I just couldn't see it. He couldn't see it either. That was his loss." "Do you think he's different now, after prison?" Jen considered. "Does it matter?" "No, not to me, but I hope for Clara's sake he figured something out." "You'd let him meet her? Eventually?" I watched Clara laugh at her toy. "If he proves he's changed, really changed, not for me, but she deserves the chance to know her father if he becomes someone worth knowing." "You're more forgiving than I'd be." "I'm not forgiving. I'm just not carrying hate anymore. It's too heavy." Before leaving Chicago, I did one more thing. I drove to Richard's old penthouse building. Not to go inside, just to stand across the street and look up. 4,000 square feet of perfection. Every room designed by me. Every detail chosen to make Richard look sophisticated, cultured, human. I'd poured my heart into that space, and I'd left it behind without a second thought. "That's where we used to live," I told Clara, pointing up. "Big," she observed. "Very big. But not a home. Just a building full of expensive things." "Our house better?" I laughed. "Our house is much better. Our house has colors and sunshine and your toys everywhere. Our house is messy and lived in and real." "I like real." "Me too, baby. Me too." 5 years after the gala, I stood in my studio, no longer my mother's converted garage, but a proper office space in downtown Seaside with 6 full-time designers working boss under me. Clara, now 5, drew at a small table in the corner, working on what she called her designs. Mostly scribbles and shapes, but I praised every one like it was the Sistine Chapel. My phone rang. "Jen, you sitting down?" "Should I be?" "Richard's being released. Served 4 years, getting out 2 years early for good behavior." I felt nothing. No fear, no anxiety, just mild curiosity. "Okay." "He's requested a supervised visit with Clara through official channels. His lawyer sent a formal request." I looked at my daughter singing to herself as she colored, happy, healthy, completely unaware her father existed. "What do you think?" Jen asked. "I think I need to talk to a child psychologist. And I think if he's serious about being in her life, he needs to prove it through consistency, not just one visit." "You're really considering it?" "He's her father. If he's actually changed, she deserves to know him. But on my terms, supervised, gradual, and the second he shows signs of manipulation, it's over." "When did you become so wise?" "When I stopped letting fear make my decisions." 3 months later, Richard Morrison sat across from me in a family counseling office, a therapist between us. He looked different, older, thinner. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. His hair was graying, but mostly his eyes were different, less sharp, less calculated, more human. "Thank you for agreeing to this," he said quietly. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for Clara. She deserves the chance to know her father if you've actually become someone worth knowing." "I understand." The therapist, Dr. Margaret Hale, leaned forward. "Richard, you've been in intensive therapy for 4 years. Can you tell Catherine what you've learned?" Richard took a breath. "I learned that I built my entire identity on being better than other people, richer, more successful, more powerful. And when you're competing constantly, everyone becomes a tool, including the people you're supposed to love. I treated Kate like an employee, a particularly valuable employee, but still, someone whose job was making me look good. I never saw her as a full person with her own dreams, her own talent, her own life separate from mine." He looked at me. "I watched your TEDx talk about designing spaces for trauma survivors, about building a company that prioritizes healing over profit. You're doing everything I should have done, building with soul instead of just structure." "I learned from your mistakes," I said. "So thank you for that, I guess." He smiled sadly. "I earned that. Can you tell me why you want to meet Clara?" "Because she's my daughter, and because I want to show her that people can change, that making mistakes doesn't mean you're defined by them forever, that even broken people can do the work to become whole." Pretty speech. "It's true." He met my eyes. "I know I have to earn this. I'm not asking for custody or co-parenting, just the chance to be in her life, supervised, on your schedule, for as long as you'll allow it." Dr. Hale looked at me. "Catherine, how do you feel about starting with supervised visits? Monthly to start, with the option to increase if things go well?" I thought about Clara, about her questions. "Where's my daddy?" she'd asked last month. I'd told her the truth. "Your daddy made some mistakes and had to go away to learn to be better. When he's ready, you'll meet him. What if I don't like him? Then you don't have to see him. You always have a choice, baby." Now, looking at Richard, I saw something I'd never seen before. Genuine humility. "Monthly supervised visits," I said. 1 hour in this office. If you miss one visit or show up late, we're done. If you criticize me or try to manipulate Clara, we're done. If you make her feel guilty about anything, we're done. Understood?" "Understood. Thank you, Kate." "Don't thank me. Prove you deserve this." The first visit happened 2 weeks later. Clara was nervous, clutching her stuffed rabbit. I held her hand as we walked into the counseling office where Richard waited. He knelt down to her level, didn't reach out to touch her, just smiled gently. "Hi, Clara. I'm Richard, your dad." Clara looked at me. I nodded encouragement. "Hi," she said quietly. "I brought you something." He held out a children's book. "Your mom told Dr. Hell you like stories about birds." Clara's eyes widened. She took the book, looked at the cover. "Owls. I thought you might like owls. They're very wise birds." "I'm wise too. Mama says so." Richard's eyes filled with tears. "I bet you are. You look just like your mama. She's the wisest person I know." They read the book together for the full hour. Clara warmed up gradually, showing him her drawings, telling him about her friend at preschool, explaining in serious detail why yellow was the best color. Richard listened, really listened, asked questions, laughed at her stories. When the hour ended, Clara hugged her rabbit but waved goodbye to Richard. "Can I come back next month?" he asked her. Clara looked at me. I nodded. "Okay," she said, "but bring more bird books." Deal. The visits continued, monthly at first, then twice monthly, then weekly. Richard never pushed for more than I offered, never questioned my rules, never tried to manipulate the situation. Clara grew comfortable with him, started calling him Dad Richard to distinguish him from the dad in her favorite books. They painted together, read together, built elaborate structures with blocks. "He's really trying," Jen observed after 6 months of visits. "I never thought I'd say this, but I think he might actually be becoming a decent human." He hurt me too much for me to ever trust him completely, I said. But Clara loves him, and he's showing up for her. That's enough. When Clara was 7, she asked the question I'd been dreading. Mama, why didn't you and Dad Richard live together when I was born? We were painting in my studio. Clara had her own easel now, creating abstract pieces that were actually quite good. I put down my brush and knelt beside her. Because Dad Richard was mean to me. Not hitting mean, but he said mean things and made me feel small. So I left, to keep us both safe. Is he still mean? No, he learned to be kind. But it took him a long time. Why was he mean before? Because he was hurt inside. And sometimes hurt people hurt other people. But the good news is hurt people can also heal. Your dad healed, and now he's kind. Clara considered this seriously. I'm glad you left. Our house is better. Me too, baby. But I'm also glad Dad Richard learned to be nice, because now I have 2 houses. I laughed. That's a very wise way to look at it. Owls are wise, she said seriously, and Mama is wise, and I'm wise like both of you. You absolutely are. 8 years after the gala, my company was featured in Architectural Digest. The article was titled, Catherine Ross, Building Empire Through Empathy. It featured photos of my projects, homes for trauma survivors, community centers designed for healing, affordable housing that prioritized dignity over profit, and one photo of me in my studio with Clara, both of us covered in paint, laughing. The article quoted me, I spent years making other people's empires look good. Now I'm building my own, not with money or power, with purpose, with humanity, with the understanding that every space we create either helps people heal or helps them hide. I choose healing. Richard sent a message through his lawyer. Proud of you, proud of what you built, proud that Clara has you as a mother. I didn't respond, but I appreciated it. 10 years after the gala, I sat on my porch watching Clara and Richard fly a kite on the beach. Clara was 12 now, brilliant, creative, kind. She spent weekends with Richard, unsupervised now, after years of proving himself trustworthy. They had a good relationship, not perfect, but healthy. Jen sat beside me, both of us drinking coffee in the morning sun. You did it, she said. Did what? Everything. You escaped. You survived. You built a life. You even managed co-parenting with a reformed narcissist. You're kind of amazing. I laughed. I'm not amazing, I'm just stubborn. I refuse to let Richard Morrison define my story. That's what makes you amazing. Down on the beach, Clara squealed as the kite soared higher. Richard smiled, genuine, unguarded, the smile of a man who'd learned what actually mattered. You know what the best part is? I said. What? He didn't destroy me, he tried. For 8 years, he tried to make me small, controllable, his. But I was always myself, I just forgot for a while. And when I remembered, when I walked out of that gala without a word, I took back every piece of me he'd tried to erase. To silent departures, Jen said, raising her coffee cup. To silent departures, I agreed. And the lives we built after. We sat in comfortable silence, watching kites dance in the ocean breeze. Proof that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply walk away and build something better in the space you create by leaving. 15 years after the gala, I attended another charity event. Not in Chicago, in Portland, a fundraiser for domestic violence survivors. I wore red, bright, bold, unapologetic red, the same shade I'd worn to my design studio opening 23 years ago, before Richard Morrison convinced me gray was more sophisticated. Clara, 17 now, attended with me. She wore yellow. We were a riot of color in a sea of neutrals. Nervous, Joyce asked? No, not anymore. I was keynote speaker. My topic, the architecture of freedom, how physical space shapes emotional safety. Before I went on stage, a young woman approached me, early 20s, nervous, holding a small, clutch purse with white knuckles. Ms. Ross, I'm sorry to bother you. I needed to tell you. Your story saved my life. Tell me. I was engaged to a man like your ex-husband, controlling, isolating, making me small. I saw your TEDx talk 3 years ago, and I left. Just like you did. Packed a bag and left. How are you now? Happy? I'm in grad school. Design, actually. Because of you. I want to create spaces that help people heal. I hugged her. You're going to do amazing things. So are you. You already are. After she walked away, Clara touched my arm. Does it ever stop, people thanking you? I hope not, because it means people are still leaving, still choosing themselves, still building lives on the other side of their silent departures. You're pretty cool, Mom. You're cooler. You got my strength without having to learn it through suffering. That's exactly what I wanted for you. I stepped onto the stage. 200 faces looked back at me. Survivors, advocates, designers, people still figuring out how to leave, people who'd already left and were rebuilding. My name is Catherine Ross, I began. 15 years ago, I was Catherine Morrison, and I'm here to tell you, leaving is possible, healing is possible, building a life that's entirely yours is possible. I'm proof, and you will be too. I spoke for 40 minutes about control and freedom, about vanishing and rebuilding, about the importance of spaces that say you belong here instead of you're only welcome if you perform perfectly. When I finished, the room stood and applauded. Clara caught my eye from the front row. She was crying, proud. That night, back in our house, the beautiful, colorful house I designed myself, full of light and art and Clara's laughter, I stood at my studio window looking out at the ocean. Richard had texted, "Saw your speech online. You were magnificent. Thank you for giving our daughter a mother worth admiring." I smiled and deleted the message. Not out of anger, just out of knowing I didn't need his validation anymore. I needed nothing from him except consistent kindness toward Clara, and he provided that for 13 years now. Good enough. Jen called. "You brought down the house tonight." It felt good, speaking truth, helping people. You know what Richard lost when you left? What? Everything, but not because you destroyed him, because he'd built his entire empire on your foundation. And when you removed yourself, he had nothing left to stand on. He has Clara, and he has himself. Finally, that's something. You're too generous. I'm exactly generous enough. I don't forgive him, I don't trust him, but I don't hate him either. And that's freedom, Jen. That's what I built on the other side of that gala. A life where I'm not defined by his mistakes or even by my own survival. I'm just me, Catherine, designer, mother, woman who wears red dresses and teaches her daughter that leaving is strength. I love you. I love you too. Thanks for answering that text 15 years ago, the one that said I'm ready. Best text I ever received. We said goodbye. I turned off the lights and went upstairs where Clara was already asleep, her sketchbook full of design ideas on her nightstand. I kissed her forehead. You'll never have to vanish silently, baby, because you'll always know you're enough. I went to my own room, looked at myself in the mirror, the same mirror technique that had helped me see clearly in that hotel bathroom 15 years ago. 53 years old, gray in my hair, laugh lines around my eyes, wearing a red dress that made me feel powerful. I looked happy. No, not just happy, free. And freedom, I'd learned, wasn't about money or power or status. It was about the moment you chose yourself, the moment you walked away from anything that made you smaller, the moment you vanished from the gala silently and left everything behind except the truth of who you were. And in that space, that beautiful empty space where someone else's empire used to stand, you built something better. You built yourself.